Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Wednesday, October 1st, 2025. This is USA Today's The Excerpt. Today, the government has shut down. What's next? Plus, breaking down the meeting of top military commanders in Virginia yesterday, and the baseball playoffs are here. The federal government shut down at midnight as President Donald Trump and congressional Democrats blamed each other for failing to reach an agreement in a bitter funding standoff. It marks the 15th government shutdown since 1981, and there's no end in sight as Democratic lawmakers demand healthcare policy changes that Trump and Republicans have refused to entertain. Some 750,000 federal employees, ranging from workers at national parks to financial regulators, could be furloughed under a shutdown, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, withholding about $400 million in daily compensation. Other workers in government services considered essential, like military members and law enforcement, will continue to work but won't be paid until a deal is reached. The government has shut down in large part over extending insurance subsidies to millions of Americans who purchase plans on the state and federal marketplaces. I spoke with USA Today senior national political correspondent Sarah D. Wire to get a better grasp of that issue. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. Busy week. So, a large part of this government shutdown is centered on the fight over extending insurance subsidies to millions of Americans who purchase plans on those state and federal marketplaces. Just refresh us on how this issue played out in recent weeks.
To be honest, this is something that Congress knew was coming. They wrote the law extending these insurance subsidies, and they've definitely known for the past year because states have been harassing them about making a decision on what to do. But, since August, Democrats have really pushed that these tax credits need to be extended. These tax credits aren't just the credits everyone receives. These are special tax credits called enhanced tax credits that Congress approved during the pandemic, and it dramatically expanded who qualifies for tax credits to buy insurance on the marketplace. It doubled the number of people who are purchasing insurance, and so having these end abruptly at the end of the year, it's going to affect a lot of people.
Well, I just want to get a better sense on the Democrats' perspective. We know they're the minority party. They've had few chances to try to force Republicans to do things in this climate. How have they framed this fight in particular?
They framed this as them trying to save healthcare, trying to push back on some of the things that Republicans accomplished in the GOP tax and spending bill. The other main issue of this shutdown fight is whether to go forward with the Medicaid cuts that were included in that bill. Democrats want to get rid of them, but Republicans know they need to continue those cuts in order to pay for some of the tax cuts.
Well, how have Republicans approached this issue, especially in these recent weeks within the lens of a looming and now existent government shutdown?
They phrased this as this was a bill that was a clean resolution, which meant that it was just holding government funding where it is. And they said, Democrats shouldn't force them to discuss policy issues on a government spending bill. So Republicans have really said that this is a policy fight that could happen later because the tax credits don't expire until the end of the year. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune actually told Meet the Press earlier this week that they can have that conversation, but before we do, release the hostage, set the American people free, keep the government open, and then have this conversation about those premium tax credits.
All right, well, Sarah, a lot of unknowns now. Where do you see this conversation going next?
It is extremely unlikely to change policy through a government shutdown. This shutdown is actually happening almost 12 years to the day after Republicans shut down the government over Obamacare. And now Democrats are doing the same thing. I'm not telling people who buy the tax credits to give up all hope, but it's unlikely that Democrats are going to be successful in this vein. And at the moment, no one's quite sure what the exit strategy is.
Excellent coverage for us, as always. Sarah D. Wire is a senior national political correspondent with USA Today. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
The Senate will reconvene at 10 o'clock Eastern Time this morning, while the House won't be in session at all. Republican Speaker Mike Johnson is keeping lawmakers in recess in order to pressure Democrats. You can stay with all the latest on usatoday.com. A federal judge has ruled against the Trump administration's efforts to revoke the legal status of pro-Palestinian students and activists, saying top leaders violated their right to free speech. A U.S. district judge found that actions were taken by the Departments of State and Homeland Security to strike fear into other students with similar pro-Palestinian views. and they had the effect of proactively and effectively curbing lawful pro-Palestinian speech, according to the judge. The judge sided with groups representing university faculty. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem earlier this year sought to revoke the legal status of several high-profile pro-Palestinian student activists and place them in deportation proceedings. Hundreds of top military commanders traveled from around the world on short notice to meet at a Quantico, Virginia military base yesterday. There they listened to remarks from both Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and President Donald Trump. And the meeting likely cost taxpayers millions of dollars while creating unique security challenges at home and abroad. I spoke with USA Today national security and world affairs reporter Sibel Mays-Osterman for more. Sibel, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Taylor.
So just starting with the basics here at the top, I mean, what was this summit and why was it being held?
We got news of this summit, and the order went out to top commanders in the military like a week before it happened. And so it happened on very short notice. And as soon as the news came out, there was a tremendous amount of speculation about what could happen here. Some of the theories flying around were that these top military leaders could be asked to swear like a loyalty oath, or there could be a mass firing. But what really ended up happening is that Hegseth and then later President Trump delivered speeches. Hegseth talked about his vision for the Pentagon, and he talked about kind of trying to go after what he sees as debris, as he described it, as decades of issues at the Pentagon that he said needed to be fixed.
All right, well, I want to get into some of the specifics from both the president and Hegseth. Let's start with President Donald Trump. What were some of the things that he really focused on here? What stood out to you in his remarks?
Well, for Trump, this was a pretty typical speech. So he touched on a bunch of different policy priorities, things that he's done, as is common with him, touting his record as president. Some of the things that stood out to me and some other experts that I've spoken with, he mentioned that the military might be able to use what he called dangerous cities as training grounds. And this comes just days after he deployed the National Guard to Portland, Oregon, even though the Democratic governor there did not say that they wanted the Guard in that city. You know, we have already seen the deployment of the National Guard to other areas like Los Angeles, and they're still here in Washington, D.C.
Well, you mentioned Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth earlier. I mean, what were some of the headline-grabbing moments, I guess, from his speech?
Yeah, well, Hegseth definitely outlined some themes that he has talked a lot about before. He said that standards in the military have been slipping for years and years, and they need to be brought back up to par. He said that for combat roles in the military, they need to be held to the highest male level standard. And that's something that is probably going to spark some nervousness among women veterans who I have talked to before. There have been fears that Hegseth may want to try to remove women from combat positions, although that hasn't happened. And he said, we don't want to take women out of these positions. We just want to make sure that they meet that standard. He spoke about grooming, and he issued some memos as well saying that troops need to be groomed. They need to have clean-shaven faces.
Interesting. Well, how did these remarks, Sibel, either from Trump or the defense secretary, land within the military community?
Well, it remains to be seen how the reaction might be. You know, these generals, admirals in the audience were very stoic and silent, as is kind of the style for the military. And so, you know, there was a moment when Trump paused and was like, you all can applaud if you want. And they remained very silent. I have heard from some members of the military, I heard from a retired rear admiral who said that he found it to be ironic that Hegseth and Trump in this speech said that members of the military who don't agree with their policy priorities should resign and they shouldn't be there. And he found that to be kind of contrary to the apolitical nature of the military. And there have been other critics that have said, well, why did you need to bring all these people from across the world in a trip that will cost probably millions of dollars all told here into this one place to give a speech that could have easily been a video conference or something like that?
All right, great breakdown for us. Sibel Mays-Osterman covers national security and world affairs for USA Today. Thank you, Sibel.
Thanks, Taylor.
President Trump has announced a deal with Pfizer for the drug maker to voluntarily sell medications through Medicaid at lower prices, as his administration pushes to bring down drug prices in the U.S. to match prices in other countries. The White House also said it plans to unveil a new website dubbed Trump RX to allow direct-to-consumer sales of drugs. Trump said all new Pfizer medications introduced to the U.S. market will be sold at prices that are no greater than those of comparable countries. The agreement follows an executive order Trump signed in March that instituted a so-called most favored nation policy for drug pricing. Baseball's playoffs are underway, and they didn't disappoint on the first day of the wild card round yesterday. The Tigers and Cubs won their respective first games, while the Red Sox held off the Yankees in a nail-biter before the Dodgers put up 10 runs in the nightcap. All 4 series will roll on today, beginning just after 1 Eastern Time this afternoon. You can follow along with USA Today Sports. In the wake of the controversy surrounding Jimmy Kimmel's week-long suspension, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr joined conservative podcast host Benny Johnson and issued a not-so-veiled threat saying, "We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way." David Insera, a senior fellow at the Cato Institute and an expert on First Amendment issues, says he thinks Carr may have crossed a constitutional line.
The FCC should not have the ability to meddle in the decisions of what broadcasters put on their broadcasts. And we really do need the courts, the legislature, to take a closer look at what exactly authority should the FCC have.
David recently sat down with my colleague Dana Taylor to talk through the First Amendment issues at play here. You can hear their full conversation later today, beginning at 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on this feed. And thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can find the podcast wherever you get your audio. And as always, you can email us at podcasts@usatoday.com. I'm Taylor Wilson. I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.